Welcome to our deep dive into Christmas traditions.
Yeah,
You sent over a review of 4 books on the topic,
right.
and each with a unique take on Christmas.
Yes.
So we're going to unpack some of those fascinating facts and maybe even challenge a few assumptions you might have about the holiday.
Yeah, it's really remarkable how much there is to uncover about something we think we know so well.
Yeah.
For example, did you know that for the first few centuries of Christianity,
Oh.
Christmas wasn't even celebrated?
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So how did we get from no Christmas to the massive holiday it is today?
Well, one thing that's fascinating is how these books tackle the whole religious versus secular debate surrounding Christmas.
Right.
They all agree that from the very beginning, secular aspects were kind of interwoven with the religious celebration.
I guess I always assumed there was a clear divide between the two.
Yeah.
Were these books suggesting that we move beyond that?
Absolutely. They're pushing for a more nuanced understanding, encouraging us to explore how different Christian theologies throughout history have shaped our Christmas traditions.
Okay, so it's not about separating the religious from the secular,
Right.
but the books do seem to agree on one thing.
Yeah.
The real threat to Christmas isn't reindeer games, but consumerism.
Yes. And one of the books, Christmas, Festival of Incarnation, has this incredibly powerful quote.
Okay.
A capitalist Christmas focuses on all the materials that claim to be good instead of on the good that claims to be material.
Wow, that's a pretty stark way of putting it.
It is.
You've got me thinking, though,
Yeah.
if early Christians weren't celebrating Christmas,
Right.
how did it even become a holiday?
Well, even the date December 25th wasn't settled on until centuries later.
Wow.
It was heavily influenced by those early church debates and different interpretations of the Bible.
So you're telling me even something as fundamental as the date of Christmas was up for debate?
Absolutely. And that complexity carries over into the traditions themselves.
Wow.
Think about the nativity scene. You've probably seen it countless times, but many of those familiar details aren't actually in the Gospels.
You mean like the wise men bringing gifts?
Well, even calling them kings isn't in the Bible.
Oh,
And those charming details, like the ox and donkey at the manger,
right.
not in the Gospels either.
What way? So where did all that come from?
The origins of Christmas really dives deep into this.
Okay.
Explaining how those details came from Old Testament passages and some early Christian writings that aren't part of the official Bible.
Okay.
These texts are called Apocrypha, and they were quite popular in early Christianity.
So stories that weren't included in the Bible still ended up shaping how we picture Christmas.
It really is.
That's fascinating.
And the influence of these texts goes beyond imagery.
Okay.
Have you ever heard the Cherry Tree Carol?
You mean the one where Mary wants a cherry and Jesus makes the tree bend down so she can get it?
That's the one. And guess what? That story comes directly from an apocryphal text called the Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew.
Wow, so these apocryphal stories weren't just popular among everyday Christians.
Oh, right.
Didn't influential figures like the early church fathers draw upon them as well?
You're right on the money. These church fathers helped solidify the liturgical calendar and added their own interpretations to the Christmas story. For example, they drew on biblical interpretation to solidify the idea of the 3 magi.
But I remember hearing that there's a difference between how Catholics and Protestants view some of these elements.
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
Some details stemming from apocryphal texts and interpretations by church fathers are embraced more by Catholic tradition than Protestant tradition.
Okay.
It's a reminder of the diversity within Christianity itself.
So we've been talking about the historical and theological roots of Christmas, but what about those more modern traditions? How did someone like Santa Claus become such a central figure?
Well, Santa's story is a fascinating blend of folklore, historical figures, and marketing savvy. You have the real Saint Nicholas, a 4th century bishop known for his generosity, who slowly morphed into this jolly gift giver over time.
Right, and then you have writers like Washington Irving shaping his image in the 19th century.
Exactly. Irving romanticized the image of Saint Nicholas in his works.
Right.
And then there's Clement Clarke Moore, who wrote "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and cemented many of the details we associate with Santa today.
And of course, we can't forget Coca-Cola's influence in shaping Santa's iconic red and white suit.
Right.
It's incredible how these seemingly separate threads, religion, history, even marketing, all intertwine to create the Christmas we know.
It's a reminder that even something as seemingly simple as Santa Claus has a surprisingly complex backstory.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that alongside this evolving figure of Santa, There were also those who opposed Christmas celebrations altogether.
Wait, are you talking about the Puritans?
You got it.
I remember learning something about that.
The Puritans saw the festivities and merrymaking as distractions from the true religious meaning of Christmas. In fact, they actually tried to ban Christmas celebrations in 17th century England and America.
Wow, a Christmas ban.
I know.
They weren't exactly subtle, were they?
Yeah.
But clearly their efforts didn't last.
You're absolutely right. The urge to celebrate seems to have prevailed.
Yeah.
But their concerns about the distractions of the holiday raise an interesting question. How do we balance those secular traditions with the religious heart of Christmas?
Right.
How do we ensure that the good that claims to be material, as that book put it,
Right.
doesn't get lost in all the tinsel and shopping sprees?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It does.
Like we're focusing too much on the material aspects of Christmas.
Right.
And losing sight of the deeper meaning.
Yeah.
I'm curious, though, about one of the books we mentioned earlier, Christmas, Festival of Incarnation.
Yeah.
It seems to offer a different perspective on how those secular aspects might actually connect to the religious meaning.
That's a great point, and it's something we'll definitely explore further. Christmas. Festival of Incarnation brings a really unique perspective,
Okay.
arguing that even the secular aspects of Christmas can be seen as expressions of the incarnation God becoming human in Jesus.
I'm not sure I follow.
Okay.
Isn't Christmas inherently religious?
Whoa.
How can we move beyond that distinction?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about how this book connects those seemingly separate ideas.
Well, the book uses a fascinating metaphor of theater.
Okay.
Imagine the nativity scene as a stage,
Uh-huh.
the ox donkey,
Yeah.
even the wise men. They're all players in this grand drama of God becoming human.
Okay.
You, the observer, become part of the performance by engaging with these tangible representations.
I see.
It suggests that even the secular elements, decorations, gift-giving Santa Claus, can become part of this grand performance, acting out the story of the incarnation in a tangible way.
So it's like those secular elements become a way of making the intangible tangible.
Exactly.
Almost like a way of experiencing the mystery of Christmas with all our senses.
Exactly. And that idea actually extends beyond the obvious things like nativity plays. The book argues that even things like Christmas decorations, gift-giving, and feasting can be seen as participating in that same movement of God entering the material world.
That's a really thought-provoking way of looking at it.
It is.
Makes me rethink the role of all the stuff we associate with Christmas.
Yeah.
It's not just about consumerism. It can be a way of expressing faith and joy.
Right.
And even making the abstract idea of the incarnation more real and relatable.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that Christmas isn't a simple either between religious and secular.
Right.
It's a rich tapestry of meaning woven from threads of history, theology, culture, and personal experience.
That brings us to another interesting point.
Yeah.
One of the books, Christmas, A Candid History, actually critiques the idea of reducing Christmas to just a generic midwinter festival.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's true that Christmas, A Candid History, pushes back against that oversimplification.
No.
While it acknowledges that Christmas shares elements with other winter celebrations, like the need for light and warmth during the darkest time of the year, it argues that there's something unique to the Christian celebration of the Incarnation that shouldn't be lost.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like saying, yes, we share that human need for light and warmth.
Right.
But Christmas goes beyond that.
Exactly.
There's a specific theological depth to the holiday that sets it apart.
And I think that brings us back to the importance of those theological conversations we were talking about earlier.
Right.
It's not enough to simply defend Christmas from being secularized. We need to dig deeper and grapple with its theological richness.
But with such a vast and complex history, where do we even begin with that theological exploration?
Well, I think a good starting point is to simply ask ourselves,
Okay.
what are the different ways Christians have understood the meaning of Christmas throughout history?
Right.
And how have those interpretations shaped our celebrations today?
That's a great question. It's something we can all ponder regardless of our faith background or how we choose to celebrate.
It really is. And it's a question that leads to more questions, which is always a good sign.
Yeah.
It means we're on the right track, diving deeper into the mystery and meaning of this extraordinary holiday.
This is where things get really fascinating, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
We're taking something we thought we knew
Yeah.
And suddenly we're uncovering all these layers of history,
Right.
meaning, and new ways of seeing the world.
Exactly. And that's what I find so exciting about diving into these topics. It's a reminder that even the most familiar things can hold extraordinary depth when we take the time to really look.
Uh-huh.
But I'm starting to feel like we've only scratched the surface here.
Right.
There's so much more to unpack.
I agree. I'm already feeling inspired to do some more exploring on my own.
Yes.
But before we get carried away, let's take a moment to synthesize what we've learned so far.
Okay.
We've seen how Christmas evolved from not being celebrated at all
Hmm?
to the massive holiday it is today.
Right.
We've explored the complex interplay of religious and secular traditions,
Uh-huh.
debunked some common assumptions about the nativity story,
Right.
and even traced the surprising evolution of Santa Claus.
Yeah.
But more importantly, we started to ask some deeper questions about what it really means to celebrate Christmas,
Absolutely.
how those celebrations have been shaped by different Christian theologies throughout history,
Right.
and how we can engage with this holiday in a more mindful and meaningful way.
Beautifully put. And those are questions worth pondering as we approach the Christmas season.
Yeah.
But for now, we'll have to pause our exploration and pick it up in the next part of this deep dive.
Stay tuned because we still have a lot to uncover, including a closer look at those different theologies of Christmas and how they've shaped our understanding of the holiday.
We'll also delve into the fascinating ways in which material culture, from decorations to gift giving,
Right.
can become a way of expressing and experiencing the deeper meaning of Christmas.
Until then, happy exploring.
Yes, happy exploring. Welcome back to your deep dive into the history of Christmas. When we left off, we were about to explore those different Christian theologies of Christmas and how they've shaped our understanding of the holiday.
You're right, and I'm really curious to unpack that idea. We've talked about the religious versus secular framing, but what does it mean to actually delve into the different theologies of Christmas?
Well, it's about recognizing that even within Christianity, there have been diverse interpretations of the incarnation, that core concept of God becoming human in Jesus.
Right.
And those varying interpretations influence everything from how we celebrate to what aspects of the Christmas story we emphasize.
So it's not just about defending Christmas as a religious holiday, but about understanding the nuances within that religious framework itself.
Exactly. It's about asking, how have different Christian traditions throughout history understood this event? What theological lenses have they used to make sense of it?
Can you give us an example of those different theological takes?
Absolutely.
Consider the emphasis on the vulnerability of God in becoming a baby.
That's a powerful concept that resonates deeply with many people. You know, I've always been drawn to the idea of God's vulnerability in becoming a baby. It makes the Christmas story feel so much more relatable.
I agree. There's a real tenderness to that image. But I imagine other theological interpretations might focus on different aspects of the incarnation.
You're exactly right. Some traditions might emphasize the cosmic significance of the Creator entering creation. Think about the vastness of the universe, and then imagine the Creator choosing to become a tiny, vulnerable infant in a specific time and place.
That's an entirely different way of looking at it. It shifts the focus from the intimate to the cosmic broader. So how do these different theological lenses actually play out in our Christmas celebrations?
They influence everything. For instance, the hymns and carols we sing often reflect specific theological interpretations.
Mhm.
Some might highlight the humble birth of Jesus in a stable, while others might proclaim the glory of God coming to earth.
It's like different facets of the same diamond, each reflecting light in a unique way.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And those different theological interpretations also shape liturgical practices, the types of artwork we see associated with Christmas, and even the way we tell the Christmas story to our children.
So Christmas isn't just a static set of traditions, but a dynamic tapestry
Yeah.
woven from these different theological threads.
Precisely. And recognizing that diversity of interpretations can enrich our own understanding and appreciation of the holiday.
That's a great segue back to one of the books we discussed earlier, Christmas, Festival of Incarnation, which offered a fascinating take on how even the secular aspects of Christmas can be seen as expressions of the incarnation. Can you remind us about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This book argues that all those tangible aspects of Christmas, the lights, the trees, the gifts, can actually participate in that same movement of God taking on physical form in Jesus. Remember that metaphor of theater we talked about?
Right.
It extends to those material elements, too. They become a way of making the spiritual visible, tangible, and relatable.
It's like they become props in that grand drama of God becoming human. It's a reminder that the material world isn't inherently bad or opposed to the spiritual.
Yeah.
In fact, those material elements can become vehicles for expressing faith and experiencing joy.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's not about rejecting the material world, but about seeing how it can be infused with spiritual meaning.
Speaking of the material world, what about Santa Claus?
Right.
He's arguably the most recognizable figure associated with Christmas today.
Yeah.
And his story is as much about commercialism as it is about tradition.
You're right. Santa Claus represents this fascinating intersection of ancient traditions, historical evolution, and modern marketing. Remember, his story is rooted in the real St. Nicholas,
Yeah.
a 4th century bishop known for his generosity.
Right.
But over centuries, that image morphed and evolved, influenced by folklore literature and even those iconic Coca-Cola ads.
It's amazing to think how these seemingly disparate elements of 4th century bishop, 19th century literature, and 20th century advertising all converge to create the Santa Claus we know today.
It speaks to the dynamic nature of tradition itself, how it's constantly being reshaped and reinterpreted by each generation.
So we've got this incredibly complex figure at the center of our modern Christmas celebrations. How do we reconcile that with those concerns about consumerism that we talked about earlier?
It's a tricky balance for sure, and it comes back to that challenge of being mindful and intentional about our celebrations. We can appreciate the joy and nostalgia associated with Santa Claus, while also being aware of the commercial forces that have shaped his image and perhaps reclaiming some of the original spirit of generosity that his story embodies.
That's an important point. It's not about simply rejecting the commercial aspects of Christmas,
Hmm.
but about being aware of them and making conscious choices about how we engage with them.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have agency in shaping our own Christmas traditions and experiences. We can choose to focus on those elements that resonate most deeply with us, whether that's the religious significance of the holiday, the joy of giving and receiving gifts, the warmth of family gatherings, or the simple beauty of the season.
That idea of choice really resonates with me. It's about recognizing that there's no right way to celebrate Christmas. What matters is finding those traditions and practices that help us connect to the deeper meaning of the holiday, however we understand that meaning.
Well said. And it brings us back to that important question we posed earlier. What are the different ways Christians have understood the meaning of Christmas throughout history? And how do those interpretations inform our own celebrations today?
I love that we keep circling back to that question.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that this deep dive isn't just about learning historical facts, but about engaging in a deeper reflection on what Christmas means to us personally.
Exactly. And that's a reflection that can extend beyond those who identify as Christian. We can all ask ourselves, what resonates with me about this holiday? What values and traditions do I want to cultivate and pass on?
You know, it's striking me now how much we've covered in this deep dive. We've explored the surprising origins of Christmas, debunked myths about the nativity story, traced the evolution of Santa Claus, delved into the complex interplay of religious and secular traditions, and even touched on the consumerism debate. And yet it still feels like there's so much more to uncover.
You're absolutely right. And that's the beauty of these deep dives. They spark curiosity, challenge assumptions, and leave us wanting to explore further. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's shift gears and focus on something specific. That one of the books highlighted the idea of Christmas as a celebration of the incarnation spilling over into even those secular aspects.
Yes, let's unpack that a bit more. It's a fascinating concept and one that I think a lot of people might not have considered before.
Right. It's about recognizing that the incarnation God becoming human isn't just an abstract theological concept, but a reality that can infuse every aspect of our lives, including our celebrations.
But how exactly does that play out in practice? How can we see those secular elements of Christmas, the lights, the decorations, the gift-giving, as expressions of the incarnation?
That's a great question, and I think it's helpful to return to that metaphor of theater that we discussed earlier. Imagine the Christmas season as a grand stage, and all those material elements, the decorations, the food, the music, as props in this performance.
So instead of seeing those things as merely secular or commercial, we can see them as part of this larger story, this grand narrative of God entering the world.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that even the seemingly mundane aspects of our celebrations can be imbued with deeper meaning. Think about the simple act of decorating a Christmas tree. It's a tradition that has pagan roots, but it also resonates with the Christian story of the tree of life. And those twinkling lights can be seen as a symbol of the light that Christ brought into the world.
That's a beautiful way to think about it. It's like we're taking something ordinary, a tree, some lights, and transforming it into something extraordinary, something that points to a deeper truth.
And that's what's so powerful about this idea of Christmas as a celebration of the incarnation spilling over into those secular aspects.
Hmm.
It allows us to see those everyday elements of our celebrations, the gifts, the food, the gatherings, as expressions of something profound, something that connects us to the mystery of God becoming human.
It's like we're participating in this grand cosmic drama, not just as observers, but as actors on the stage.
You're exactly right. And in that sense, even something as simple as exchanging gifts can take on a deeper meaning. It can
Mhm.
become an act of love and generosity, a way of sharing the abundance that God has given us.
So it's not about rejecting the material aspects of Christmas, but about reframing them, seeing them through the lens of the incarnation.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that the material world can be a conduit for spiritual experience, that the sacred can be found in the everyday, and that the joy and love we experience during the Christmas season can be a reflection of the profound joy and love that God has for us.
That's a really powerful and inspiring way to think about Christmas. But before we get too carried away with these beautiful ideas, let's touch on one more point from the source material. One of the books, Christmas, A Candid History, seemed to push back against the idea of Christmas simply being a generic midwinter festival. Can you remind us why?
You're right. Christmas, A Candid History acknowledges that Christmas shares some elements with other winter celebrations, the need for light during the dark days, the feasting and merrymaking. But it argues that those similarities shouldn't overshadow the unique theological significance of the holiday.
So it's not about denying those shared elements, but about ensuring they don't obscure the deeper meaning of Christmas for Christians.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that while there are universal human longings that find expression in winter festivals around the world, the Christian celebration of Christmas has its own distinct theological heart rooted in the belief in the incarnation.
That makes sense. It's about acknowledging those broader cultural influences while also appreciating the specific beliefs and traditions that shape the Christian understanding of Christmas.
Precisely. It's about holding those multiple perspectives in tension, recognizing that Christmas is both a celebration of universal human longings and a uniquely Christian holiday rooted in a specific theological understanding of the world.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the surprising origins of Christmas to the evolution of Santa Claus, the interplay of religious and secular traditions, and even the theological nuances of the incarnation.
Mm.
But one thing that's becoming increasingly clear is that there's no single definitive answer to the question of what Christmas really means.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. Christmas is a holiday that's constantly evolving, being reinterpreted and reshaped by each generation, each culture, each individual. It's a tapestry woven from threads of history, theology, personal experience, and cultural influences.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so valuable. It's not about arriving at a singular truth, but about expanding our understanding, challenging our assumptions, and sparking new questions.
Oh, beautifully said. And those questions are the ones that ultimately matter most, because they're the ones that lead us to deeper reflection, greater understanding, and a richer appreciation for this complex, multifaceted holiday. But I sense we've reached a natural pause in our exploration.
You're right. It feels like we've reached the end of this part of our journey.
But don't worry, there's more to come. In the next part of this deep dive, we'll explore some practical ways to engage with the Christmas season in a more mindful and meaningful way, drawing on all the insights we've gleaned from these four remarkable books.
So stay tuned for the final part of your Christmas deep dive, where we'll explore how these historical and theological insights can inform our own personal celebrations of this extraordinary holiday. Until then, happy exploring. Welcome back to the final part of your Christmas deep dive. We've explored the history, the theology, and even the commercialization of Christmas.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about what it all means for you
Right.
as we head into the holiday season.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? It's been quite a journey, but I think that's what makes this deep dive so valuable.
Yeah.
We've gone beyond simply recounting the story of Christmas.
Right.
We've peeled back the layers, challenged assumptions, and sparked new ways of thinking about this holiday.
Exactly. And I'm especially excited about this last part.
Okay.
Because we're going to move from the theoretical to the practical.
Yes.
How can we take all these fascinating insights and apply them to our own celebrations? What does it look like to celebrate Christmas in a more mindful and meaningful way?
Well, I think a great starting point is to revisit those different theological interpretations of Christmas we discussed earlier.
Okay.
Remember how we talked about those various lenses through which Christians have understood the incarnation?
Right, like focusing on the vulnerability of God becoming a baby,
Yes.
or the cosmic significance of the Creator entering creation.
Exactly. Those different theological perspectives can enrich our own understanding and experience of Christmas. So take some time to reflect on those different interpretations. Which ones resonate most deeply with you? Which ones challenge your existing
I
assumptions?
love that idea. It's like we're being invited to choose our own adventure,
Right.
to personalize our understanding of Christmas
Yeah.
based on those theological insights that speak most powerfully to us.
Precisely. And once you've taken some time for that personal reflection, consider how those insights might shape your celebrations.
So, for example, if someone is really moved by the idea of God's vulnerability in becoming human, they might choose to emphasize that aspect in their celebrations.
Right.
Maybe they focus on acts of service
Yeah,
or reaching out to those in need during the holiday season.
that's a great example. Or perhaps they create a nativity scene that emphasizes the simplicity and humility of the stable.
Yeah.
There are countless ways to weave those theological reflections into our celebrations.
It's about making those abstract concepts tangible, bringing them to life in our own unique ways. And that brings us back to that fascinating idea from Christmas, Festival of Incarnation, the notion of Christmas as theater, where even the secular elements become part of this grand performance of God becoming human.
You remember that metaphor well? And I think it offers a powerful framework for approaching our celebrations.
Okay.
Imagine yourself as an actor on the stage of Christmas,
Uh-huh.
and all those familiar elements, the decorations, the gifts, the gatherings, as props in this grand performance.
So instead of simply going through the motions, we can imbue those actions with intention and meaning.
Right.
We can choose to see those material elements as expressions of something deeper,
Exactly.
something that connects us to the heart of the Christmas story.
Think about those twinkling lights on your Christmas tree.
Right.
You can see them as just pretty decorations, or you can see them as a symbol of the light that Christ brought into the world.
Right.
It's a shift in perspective, a way of infusing those everyday objects with spiritual significance.
I love that. It's like we're taking something ordinary and transforming it into something extraordinary, something that points to a deeper truth.
Yeah.
It makes me think about the importance of ritual and symbolism in our celebrations.
Absolutely. And those rituals and symbols can be incredibly powerful. They help us connect to something larger than ourselves, to tap into those deeper meanings and values that we want to embody during the Christmas season.
So how can we be more intentional about incorporating those meaningful rituals into our celebrations?
Well, it starts with asking yourself, what truly matters to me about Christmas?
Right.
What values and traditions do I want to cultivate and pass on?
Those are great questions to ponder.
Yeah.
It's about getting to the heart of what makes Christmas meaningful for you and then finding creative ways to express that in your celebrations.
Exactly. Maybe it's about prioritizing quality time with loved ones, creating a sense of warmth and connection in your home, or engaging in acts of generosity and service.
And it doesn't have to be complicated or elaborate.
Yeah,
Sometimes the simplest rituals are the most powerful.
you're absolutely right. Think about the tradition of reading the Christmas story aloud.
Yeah.
It's a simple act, but it can be incredibly moving, reminding us of the heart of the holiday amidst all the festivities.
Or the tradition of singing Christmas carols together.
Yes.
It's a way of connecting to a shared heritage of experiencing the beauty and joy of the season through music.
Exactly. And those shared experiences, those moments of connection and reflection, are ultimately what make Christmas so special. But let's not forget about those 4 books you shared that inspired this deep dive. I think they're worth revisiting as well.
You're right. They offer such a rich tapestry of insights. And I love how each book brings a different perspective to the table.
Absolutely. The Origins of Christmas is fascinating for anyone curious about the historical development of those familiar traditions.
Right?
It's packed with details about the apocryphal texts, the early church fathers, and the evolution of the nativity story.
And Christmas, Festival of Incarnation, is the one for those seeking a deeper theological exploration.
Yes.
It challenges us to see those secular elements of Christmas as expressions of the Incarnation,
Yeah.
reframing our understanding of the holiday in a profound way.
Precisely. And for those who want a more concise overview of Christmas, A Candid History provides a solid introduction. Though we did have some lively discussions about its perspective on Christmas as a midwinter festival.
We did.
Yeah.
But those disagreements are valuable too, pushing us to think critically and refine our own understanding.
Exactly. And finally, there's the 4th book we mentioned,
Mhm.
which delves into the darker side of Christmas, the consumerism, the commercialization, the pressure to create a perfect holiday experience.
You're talking about the book that had that powerful quote about the materials that claim to be good instead of the good that claims to be material.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And while it's a bit more critical in its approach, I think it's an important reminder to be mindful of those forces that can sometimes overshadow the true spirit of Christmas.
It's a call to reclaim the holiday from those commercial pressures,
Yeah.
to focus on the things that truly matter.
Yeah.
Love, generosity, connection, and this celebration of something profound and mysterious.
Beautifully put. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to revisit those books, delve deeper into those topics that resonated most, and allow those insights to inform your own celebration of Christmas this year.
And remember, this is just the beginning of your exploration. Christmas is a holiday that invites ongoing reflection, discovery, and personal meaning-making.
Yeah.
So keep asking those questions, keep exploring those different perspectives, and keep seeking out those traditions and practices that help you connect to the heart of this extraordinary holiday.
Well said. And on that note, it's time for us to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Christmas.
We hope you've enjoyed the journey, and we wish you a season filled with joy, meaning, and perhaps a few more aha moments as you continue your own explorations of this fascinating holiday.